Had the experience of being asked to talk about something and thought, is that person in my head? Um, right speech. I feel like right speech has been like a lifelong thing for me. Um, I grew up in a family, my mother was very sarcastic. My father was also sarcastic and kind of had a dry sense of humor, but he could get a little mean. And so this sort of defending ourselves by words is pretty much how I learned to communicate growing up. Um, you know, in my home, you were expected to work hard, to not call attention to yourself, certainly not to brag about yourself, and if anybody complimented you, you were supposed to talk them out of it. Um, so I came into the world with a lot of not good skills. The first time I really realized that the way we communicated at home wasn't normal was when I was at Girl Scout camp. I think I was probably about 11. Um, and we were at the pool with our counselors, and I made a comment to one of the counselors. I don't even remember what it was, but something that would be a typical thing that would be said in my house. And she started to cry. And I'm just like, uh-oh. Um, yeah, I really had no clue at all because I had such armor on. I had no clue at all how what I said affected other people. And I feel like what's happened for me with practice over the years is that my sarcasm has kind of softened into what I hope is a more playful kind of kidding thing. But also, as that's happened, I've noticed that I've become kind of flippant. Like I'll say things and I'll think, I wonder why I said that. Um, so yeah, this feels like my life's work. So we're studying the Eightfold Path, and as you all know, the Four Noble Truths, that there's suffering, that there's a cause of suffering, that there's a cure of suffering, and that cure is the Eightfold Path. That teaching is the very first teaching that the Buddha gave after he was enlightened, and it was also the very last teaching he gave on his deathbed. And I think of it the way that I think of the precepts, not so much as rules. My phone is dying. Okay, sorry. I'm trying to get the clock on my phone so I know what time it is. There it is. Okay. So that these aren't rules. They aren't things that like you achieve. Like I don't practice so much that like now I have right speech. It's a description of how a bodhisattva lives in the world. It's a way to avoid the extremes of self-indulgence and total self-denial on the other hand. And for this reason, the Buddha called it the middle way. And that's where we hope our practice takes us, is the middle way. So of the 10 grave precepts, 4 of them talk about right speech. The 4th one, I vow to refrain from false speech. The 5th, actually that's the 6th, I vow not to slander. And I vow not to praise self at the expense of others. And I vow not to disparage the 3 treasures. So in the Pali Canon, they talk about the 4 parts of right speech. First of all, to abstain from false speech, to not tell lies, including lies of omission, to not slander others or speak in a way that causes disharmony or enmity. To abstain from rude, impolite, or abusive language, and to not indulge in idle talk or gossip. The practice of these 4 aspects of right speech goes beyond simply "thou shalt not." It means speaking truthfully and honestly, speaking in a way to promote harmony and goodwill, and using language to reduce anger and ease tensions, using language in a way that's useful. Reframed in the positive, we could say that these guidelines urge us to say only what is true, to speak in ways that promote harmony among people, to use a tone of voice that is pleasing, kind, and gentle. Thich Nhat Hanh spoke about right speech in the heart of Buddhist teachings, and he talked about deep listening. And he said that deep listening is the foundation of right speech. If we cannot listen mindfully, we cannot practice right speech. No matter what we say, it will not be mindful, because we'll be speaking only our own ideas and not in response to the other person. I remember when I was Shuso, I was very nervous about the part of the closing ceremony where people ask you questions. Because I thought, well, somebody's going to ask me something I don't know, or what am I going to say? And someone gave me some really, really good advice. And they said, you know, you're not there to answer questions, you're there to answer the person. And that made all the difference to me, because you have to kind of be in your body and be sensitive to how the other person feels to really see what they might be asking you or why they might be asking you something. And of course, you know, you also have to be careful with this, because you don't want to sort of make up things that you think people feel. But if you have an awareness of how that person feels, I think it's much clearer, you know, what they're asking you and what they may need to hear. And the same question from 2 different people won't get the same answer from someone who uses skillful means, because we're not all alike. And we try to use skillful means to say things in a way that the person we're talking to can benefit. And that just isn't the same for everybody. In his book, Returning to Silence, Katagiri Roshi said, "Kind speech is not the usual sense of kindness. It can appear in various ways, but we should remember that it must constantly be based on compassion. Under all circumstances, that compassion is always giving somebody support or help or a chance to grow." One thing that Chris had said a couple of weeks ago that really helped me is that when you get triggered by something that somebody says, and I like saying triggered as opposed to when somebody pushes your buttons, because they aren't pushing your buttons. You're the one who's having the reaction. They're just saying whatever it is they're saying. That to notice in your body what happens, and not to go to, I'm angry, I'm pissed off, but to note anger is arising. Because that gives you some separation, and it gives you a chance to look at what that might mean to you, what you might be hearing that isn't really being said. I think right speech in a community is very important. It generates trust and harmony in the Sangha. And if you're committed to the welfare of others, you should be very careful in your speech. So something that's helped me is, especially when I feel kind of triggered, is to think before I say something um, in a delicate situation. Is what am I saying? Is it true? Is it kind? Is it helpful? And is it the right time and the right place? Some things that you might want to talk to people about, you don't want to talk to in a group of people. It would be better to have them just have a one-on-one conversation with you. And I think also saying things in a way that the person you're saying them to can understand. Last year, my sister-in-law passed away unexpectedly. And my brother Greg, who's 3 years older than me, we haven't had the best relationship. It especially got kind of testy after my dad died. My mom died first and then my dad, and all this stuff about the trust and stuff like that. And I kind of developed an opinion about him. And because I don't see him very often because he lives in LA and we weren't really in touch, it's like I had this frozen idea of who he was. And I thought that he was greedy and materialistic, dishonest, and insensitive. But when he called me and told me that his wife had died, I just went. There was no question. I would just go. I had no idea what I would say to him, but I knew that I needed to be there. And while I was there, I got to know my brother and realized that the ideas that I had about him weren't really true. He's really quite sensitive. He is forthcoming in a very kind way. He's funny. He loves his cats. They're like his kids. Yeah, and so I felt that the gift that my sister-in-law gave me was to be able to have a relationship with my brother as he is right now. And I really never thought that that would happen. I was with him for about 5 days right after my sister-in-law died, and we talked a lot. And he shared with me how hurtful my sarcasm was when we were growing up. And I had no clue. I totally had no clue. So I was very grateful that he shared that with me. And I've had other people too, and I just have to say to all of you, I really appreciate it. If I say something that hurts your feelings or offends you in any way, please let me know, because I don't always have the awareness. Sometimes I think I'm being funny, and unfortunately, sometimes my interest in abusing myself kind of overrides my ability to pay attention. So now I always have to ask myself, okay, if you're going to say something and it's going to be funny, is this really the right time? Sure, it'll abuse you, but is it going to be helpful to anybody else? And so my primary goal in life is no longer to be funny and amusing. In Diana Rossetto's book on the precepts, she had a really great exercise that I found very, very helpful. And this is on page 76, and it's called Deepening the Inquiry. Number 1, Ask yourself, what does talking about this person in this way do for my own self-image? And this is kind of more about gossip or how you speak of someone else. For example, do you feel better about yourself in some way when you fault someone else? How does speaking of this person's behavior as fault serve me? Why do I really do it? Does it justify your own behavior? Do you feel more accepted by the people you're with? Does it make you feel important? In other words, you may find that by saying another has faults, you feel you're not alone in your own perceived faults, or it makes you feel better. I'm bad, but he's worse. Either way, our speech can be a way to avoid the deep belief of being less than. Number 2, now try to see yourself in the other person and honestly try to find examples in yourself when you have been like the person you are discussing. Change the statement from Harry is undependable to how am I undependable? Watch for situations in which you may not follow through. In other words, look at your own behavior. The idea is to keep an open awareness about your behavior without judgment or even trying to change it, although that may happen quite naturally once you become aware of your actions. What is your experience now? How do you feel about this other person, about yourself? Perhaps you feel less judgmental of her, or perhaps you notice some guilt or some other feelings arise. Number 3, now bring yourself into the dead spot by exercising the prohibitory aspect of this precept. Stop yourself from speaking disparagingly about someone else. Ask yourself if, right in this moment, I do not find fault with this person, what's the worst that could happen? Stay open. If any feelings, emotions, or bodily sensations arise, label them and rest with them, breathing in and out. Allow yourself to enter into just this. This particular question brings us to the core of our behavior, and if we stick it out, we can find what fuels it. In other words, what we get of speaking ill of others. If you're in a group, make an attempt to stop yourself from talking about others by removing yourself from the group or biting your tongue. Stay open to your reactions. And number 4, lastly, now consider, what would your relationship to this person be if you simply acknowledged her behavior without finding any fault? So I had an experience about this, excuse me, in a situation where I volunteer somewhere, and there are people that give us training in what we do to volunteer. And there's one particular person that nobody likes. And, you know, the gossip is he offends people, you know, he's a narcissist, blah, 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 blah. And I found that, you know, whenever the subject of his came up with other people I volunteered with, I would sort of join in. And then I thought, well, you know, there were some trainings I needed to do with this person to get to a level in my volunteering that I wanted to be at. And so I thought, you know, I'm just going to stop commenting on that. I'll listen to what people have to say about him, but I'm not going to participate. And it was really interesting. It really took the charge out of it for me. I mean, he's still not my favorite person. He still kind of bugs me sometimes, but it isn't everything that he is. And I realized that, you know, there are valuable things this person can teach me. And I don't need to like him, but I also don't need to speak poorly of him, because it polarizes things. And that's the last thing that you want to do if you want to be connected to people, is set things up to be polarized. So, as I said, it's an ongoing struggle with me. And I very much do appreciate feedback if I'm unusually clever and hurt your feelings, because I don't intend to. Um, I thought perhaps what we could do is break up into small groups, and I'm seeing, let's see, 3, 6, 9, 12. So maybe we could break up